Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first Clifford Park Design meeting. My name is Lauren Bryant, and I'm the project manager for Boston Parks and Recreation for the Clifford Park renovation. Before we jump into the meeting, I just want to go over a few how-tos and what to expect tonight. Tonight we have Spanish, Cape Verdean Creole, and Haitian Creole interpretation. And because the translation services and the discussion we have planned, you're going to need to choose a channel in order to hear the meeting. Even if you want to listen in English, you're going to need to choose the English channel. This will allow everyone to hear each other equally. Our Spanish interpreter tonight is Emily. Emily, can you please introduce yourself and share how to join the Spanish channel?
I'm happy to. Hola a todo el mundo, mi nombre es Emily y voy a proporcionar servicios de interpretación en español esta noche. En un momentico vamos a encender la función de interpretación. Cuando lo hacemos, verá al fondo de su ventana de Zoom un icono de un globo. Haciendo clic ahí puede acceder a la interpretación. Aunque usted desea escuchar en inglés, quizás todavía tiene que escoger el canal de inglés, así que es necesario escoger un canal para poder escuchar todos hablando en la reunión en los varios idiomas esta noche. Si se está conectando con móvil, empuje los 3 puntitos, de ahí escoge Interpretation, pues Spanish o inglés o español o el idioma que desea, pues listo o done. Si tiene alguna dificultad, por favor comunícase con nosotros en el chat. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Our Cape Verdean Creole interpreter tonight is Melissa. Melissa, can you please introduce yourself and share how to join the Cape Verdean Creole channel?
Sure, thank you. I'm happy to. Olá, boa noite. Meu nome é Melissa, sou a ser intérprete hoje. Na interpretação de hoje, não tem uns canal que não pode escolher. Por favor, se tu deseja ouvir a reunião na língua crioulo, tu calca ali naquela parte inferior de janela de Zoom, onde que te mostra um sinal de globo. Você calca naquele globo que te mostra qualquer língua que você quer ouvir reunião na ele. Se caso seja inglês, tu calca em inglês. Se é língua cabo-verdiana ou outra língua que tu deseja, por favor, você tem que calcar na ele. Senão, você consegue ouvir reunião na língua que você deseja. Em caso que você aderir à reunião através de telemóvel, por favor, você calca naqueles 3 pontinhos na boa Zoom de telemóvel para poder acessar aquele canal de interpretação. E mais uma vez, se você tiver alguma pergunta, por favor, que você hesita na contactar-nos através de chat. Obrigada, tenha uma boa noite.
Thank you, Melissa. And we also have Haitian Creole tonight, and our interpreter is Esther. Esther, can you please introduce yourself and share how to join the Haitian Creole channel?
Yes, thank you. My name is Esther. Non, moi c'est Esther, moi c'est interprète créole haïtien. Et moi, je voulais dire bienvenue, on dit bienvenue avec une réunion ça que nous avons fait pour la première fois pour Parc Clifford et que nous pourrons parler ensemble avec nous tout à l'heure comme ça et concernant de façon que nous sommes capables d'utiliser pour monter et sur service d'interprétation parce que à soir, nous avons un service d'interprétation en 3 langues qui c'est espagnol, créole cap-vert, créole haïtien. Donc, comment qu'on est capable de monter pour jouer une fonction, on va aller dans le globe là, on va cliquer là-dedans, et puis là-bas, langue qu'on voulait attendre réunion à là-dedans, que c'est une dans 3 langues, ça, même si que on t'a voulu attendre réunion en anglais, on a besoin de cliquer sur anglais pour capable attendre en anglais. Sur les par téléphone, on va peser, on va pour 3 points, dans 3 points, on va cliquer sur les mêmes pour capable comment pour capable jouer une fonction interprétation. Si que par exemple, et ou une question t'as voulu dire, ou mettez le dans le chat là, et puis au même, il faut répondre question à n'importe l'heure, capable de communiquer avec eux pendant le chat là. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our interpreters for tonight. Shauna, would you please open the interpretation channels for us? And as a reminder, everyone needs to choose a language channel in order to be able to hear the presentation, including if you're listening in English.
All set.
Okay, everybody, I'm going to give everyone a few minutes in order to join into our channels, and then I'll get started. Okay, thank you, everybody. I wanted to make sure that everyone knows that tonight's meeting is being recorded and will be available on the project website within about a week. If you haven't already had a chance to check out the project website, I can add that in the chat for you all to be able to check that out. Let me do that really quickly for you. Perfect. I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight. I know that meetings are hard and not all times and formats are convenient for all of our park users. That's why for each of the different meetings we're going to have for Clifford, we're going to have them in 2 different formats at 2 different times. Each of the meetings will share the same content and we'll be gathering the same forms of feedback. We are on Zoom tonight for our first design meeting, and we'll be on site in person on October 21st at 10 a.m. with a rain location at 1010 Mass Ave if needed. Even with offering the multiple formats and locations and times, we know that there still may be people who can't join us. If you have friends or family or neighbors who are not able to join us, please share what you learn or direct people to our project website for them to review the recorded meetings and presentations when they have a minute. Also, feel free to reach out to me directly to share your thoughts as well throughout this process. We just want to ensure that everyone feels comfortable during this conversation and that you're comfortable sharing questions and comments. Please be respectful and mindful of others' time so that everyone has the opportunity to participate. Once you've submitted a question, please wait until others have had an opportunity to ask one as well before submitting another one. And if you would prefer, you can always set up a conversation with me and you can contact me through my email and we can add that to the chat as well. I know a lot of us are fairly familiar with Zoom at this point, but just in case you aren't, we want to make sure that you know how to engage with us tonight. So at the bottom of your screen, there is what looks like a text bubble. This is for the chat feature. And then to raise your hand, you can click on the reactions button, which will allow you to raise your hand as well. Tonight, we're going to try to not have a very long presentation once we get into it, because I don't want to just sit here and talk at you. We want to hear from you. And what we're going to do is we're going to break up the presentation by themes and questions in order to get feedback from you. And then at the end of each of those topics, we're going to open it up for a broader, more general discussion for anything that maybe we didn't touch on in those discussion comments. So tonight, we're going to do an introduction, project overview. The design team's going to talk a little bit about the site analysis, what they see at the site that works, what doesn't work, what are some of the concerns, what are some of the benefits, and then we're going to do some information gathering from you guys. And mainly part of what we're looking for tonight is the next set of meetings that we have. We're going to come back with conceptual designs. And what we're trying to get tonight is information from you that's really going to help us when we're moving into that design process. So we have a pretty big team. For those who may have joined late, my name is Lauren Bryant, and I'm the project manager for the Clifford Park project. I want to acknowledge that Boston Parks is not trying to take on this park renovation in a bubble. We know there are many other city departments who play a vital role in the success of the park. On this slide, you're going to see many different individuals who've been working behind the scenes with parks as we move through this process. I know that there are some city folks that I saw that joined, so I don't know if there are any city folks that would like to say a word. I know that Councilor Fernand Janderson is also on the call, and I don't know if you would like to say anything. So if any of the city individuals that are on here would like to say a few words, please feel free to raise your hand and we can unmute you all.
I'll let Councilor Anderson go first. I'm her representative from her office.
Perfect. Councilor? are you able to unmute?
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to say hello. Good evening to everybody here. Thanks, Lauren, for the space. Just listening, taking notes, and hopefully to support my constituents in advocating for the needs for Clifford Park and in the area. Thank you so much, Lauren, for hosting this, and everyone else for your work in beautifying our district. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. Godfrey, did you also still want to say something?
Okay, there you go. Yeah, I just wanted to introduce myself as Godfred. I'm the Community Relations Director for Council Anderson's office. So I'll be the point of contact in case any constituent needed any access to our office, and I'll be on such meetings that the Parks Department holds. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And then Rep Moran, I see you on here as well.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I just wanted to just say hello to everybody. I'm the new District 9, Suffolk District 9 state representative, and very grateful to be on this call. I'll admit I'm going to do half of this one and then half of the one in person on Saturday. So I wanted to just thank you very much for making that availability. That's amazing that you're doing 2 for each session. So thanks very much.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. I think that was all the hands that I saw raised, so I may just keep moving on. Also wanted to introduce our design team. I know that at the listening session that we did a little earlier this year, the design team was there to listen and to hear, but they weren't necessarily an active part of that discussion because the city really wanted to be able to listen. But they're going to be having a much larger role moving forward, and you'll see them more as we go through. And as each of them speaks, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves during their portion of the presentation. So the project schedule, I wanted to make sure that people understand sort of where we are in the process now and sort of what the rest of this process looks like. One of the things that we tried to do at our listening session was to have the community help us guide how this process was going to work. A lot of times the community process can take several months to maybe half a year. What we looked at was wanting to have a shorter community process, is what we heard from the community, because they really are excited about getting the park under construction sooner with all of the challenges that are out there. So what we looked at is we didn't want to have one meeting and then have it drag until the next meeting and drag until the next meeting. So what we did is we wanted to set all of the dates for all 3 of our community meetings. And like I said earlier, both in person and in Zoom for each of those, because we wanted everybody to be able to save the dates on their calendars and get these out to everyone. So we took the time to actually get these scheduled so that once we start this meeting and we get going with that design process, we can just move through these and get to the construction portion at the speed that the community was really excited about being able to do. And again, this will all be posted on the project website, both the video and the presentation. So you can come back to these to see these dates as we move forward too. One of the other things that I always like to share, because people like to ask the question of how are design decisions made? And I just want everybody to understand when we're looking at park designs, it's not made in a bubble. There are so many things that go into the decisions. There's City of Boston priorities in terms of things like climate resiliency. There's safety and regulatory guidelines such as Americans with Disabilities Act, stormwater, all of those sorts of things. There's parks and recreation goals in terms of creating equitable parks and having walkable, parks within walking distance for everyone. And then there's community input, which is a huge part of what we are here for. You guys know the park better than we do. And we really want to hear from you. But we also want everybody to understand that there's a lot of things that go into these decisions. And with that, I'm going to stop talking for a little bit, and I'm going to turn it over to Ricardo and his team at BSC to introduce themselves and to jump into the presentation.
Well, thank you, Lauren. My name is Ricardo Ostrich. I'm the Director of Landscape Architecture for BSC Group, and I'll be here tonight with my colleague, Katie Kemen. And so I just want to make our presentation as brief as possible so we can hear from you. But one of the things I want to highlight is that at our first two community listening sessions, we did one of these word clouds. And so I took copious notes and really enjoyed meeting many of you there. And I think some of the things that came up were everybody's really excited about this park. They're really excited about the community, but there are issues related to lighting and security that everybody's really interested in, maintenance, safety, have it being colorful, the kids being involved. And so all these things were things that kind of were informed our kind of conversation, and also what put together this word cloud. And actually this, the background side is from our first on-site meeting that we had in August. Next slide, please. So I think this is one of these wonkish maps, but this sort of shows what I think everybody kind of understands when you go see the park. The park is sort of nestled between two different kinds of zones in the city. This is from the city zoning map. And so you see that to the sort of left-hand side of the park, you see mostly residential areas, and the part that I think a lot of the people that come to use the park come from, but they really come from a kind of all around the park. But really on one side is really residential, and then on the other side of the park, we have different kinds of uses. We have more industrial uses, we have educational uses like the Mason School, we have institutional uses, there's transportation. So the park really sits at kind of as a bit of at a fulcrum between kind of the residences and the real neighborhood, and then other kind of bigger areas that are just sort of the northeast of the park. Next slide. Next slide. There you go. Another really important thing is to really think about, how do you get to this park, and what are the sort of access points? And so we created this map that kind of shows, kind of using Google Walk, really kind of what are the closest things that are around the park, the T station, the Mason School, the pool, the shopping center, the other schools, the different parks that are just in the residential side of the project on the left-hand side of the slide. And so you can see that within a 5-minute walk, there's fairly good access. And then for a kind of a 10-minute walk, there's quite a bit. And this is particularly important for the residences. There are bus stops. And so people can get here, the community particularly can get here. And I think that that's one of the things that makes this kind of a vital place and an important place, and why we want to really make it a kind of a better place right now. Next slide. Katie will now talk to issues related to climate.
Great. As Lauren mentioned, we are looking at a number of different data sources and priorities, and one of them being climate resilience. The park is, we're looking at climate ready Boston data for stormwater flooding, for coastal flooding, for extreme heat. Here is a map that's showing stormwater flooding. So during an approximate 6-inch rainstorm, the shaded areas show areas where we could expect to see some stormwater flooding in the coming decades. And we really want to build this park to last, to have minimal disruptions, and really be comfortable and support good use for folks. So we're going to be thinking about where things are located in relation to potential flooding or other things. We can be looking at material selection, ways to make the park be more comfortable, feel cooler, and manage the stormwater. So building upon both Climate Ready Boston plans, Boston also recently released a heat resilience strategies plan. So we'll be looking at that, all of those data sources as we move into design. Next slide.
So I will just briefly do a recap of the park. I know many of you are familiar with the kind of the physical qualities of it. So, but it's important for folks just to, and I'll go fairly quickly through this, but to sort of see what we saw. And then I think in the Q&A periods and the moments we have during this presentation, if we've missed something, you could let us know what we've missed. But sort of one of the first things that, people access the park is through walking. And so some of the paths along the edges of the park are in good condition, but some are in very poor condition. And this really impacts, I think, the use, particularly folks who are handicapped or little kids or folks with visual impairments. And so I think it's important to understand kind of what's the path condition bordering the park. The next slide, please. Another important consideration that we think about is really how do people access or get into the park? And so, there's the entrance along Massachusetts Avenue. There are a number of entrances along Proctor Street. There's the entrance by the middle school. Then Norfolk Ave has a kind of fairly open area along that tree-lined way there. Along Langdon Street, there's a vehicular entrance. So, park vehicles go in, and over by Shirley Street, there's another vehicular entrance. And so those are kind of the things that how people kind of walk into the park, how they access the park. So that's something that we viewed and saw, and you see different images of the different entrances and what we saw. Next slide, please. The trees. I think one of the things that's really wonderful about this park is that it really has lots of trees, and the majority of them, are in generally fairly good condition. There are some younger trees, and there are a couple of smaller trees that are not in great shape. But overall, the park has a nice edge of trees, and we want to think about maybe do we add more trees in certain areas to increase, to what Katie said, a kind of a cooler park in the heat of the summer. Next slide, please. And then I think a very, very important issue is the existing park lighting. I think as many of you know, and I don't need to tell you, the lighting really doesn't completely work. It's very, very old. It really needs replacement. So one of the things we'll be looking at this project is really upgrading the lighting throughout the entire park. And this is very important for issues related to safety and really kind of for the community to feel kind of like this is a safer space. And so these lights and poles are really pretty out of date. And I think it's important to then really analyze them and then come up with a plan that really improves the lighting throughout the park. Next slide, please. And then just very quickly going through some of the site conditions. You see some of the fencing, the kind of weeds on one side of the fence, and then the cracked pavement along the basketball courts. And so some of the deterioration of the edges and the conditions of the park. And I think this is something that is important that we address and fix, because I think that that'll really only help to improve the conditions and hopefully the kinds of things that can take place in the future in this park. Next slide, please. We see other things. We see kind of this wall, the backstop there, and how that's kind of worn out. When we were there a couple of weeks ago, there was kind of wet areas throughout this portion of the park, and that was really kind of a concern. The little practice areas pits are out of date on the right-hand side. Other pieces of the park look better, at least with the summer that we had with all the rainfall. But again, what can we do to improve them? And then this edge along where the base is, what are things that can happen or be better here so that this is actually kind of better maintained and is a welcoming and more kind of pleasant park than what it actually is today in certain areas. The next slide. We see things like, for example, those benches, can shade be added to the benches on the bottom right-hand side? Can that sharp thing, can that be kind of managed in a different way so it doesn't sort of greet you the minute you walk into the park? The tennis court, is there something we should do about the tennis courts, move them, change them? What are the concerns or issues related to this? And then sort of just the gates, and what are the gates, and really issues related to how do we create an enclosed park, but also make it accessible and welcoming to everyone in the community. The next slide, please. The playground is also a key and important area. There are, of course, two playgrounds. There's one, a smaller tot lot on Mass Ave, and then this bigger lot over by the Mason School. The kids in the Mason School use this playground a lot, and when we were out there, they were using chalk. And so what can we do to sort of improve the park so it becomes a more and better kid-friendly space? And so I think that this is something that we'd like to hear from you about, what kind of improvements and what kind of equipment and what kind of play equipment you would like to see. And so there's a portion of the program that at sort of towards the end that Lauren's going to go through what are the different options, and for folks to really consider what things might be available to improve this experience for the children. Next slide. And then there's these utility boxes and walking with the Parks Department people, some of them are okay, and some of them are kind of scary, like that one on the bottom right-hand side that's sort of encrusted with vegetation and just gives the place a very kind of sad feeling. And so I think that if we kind of can improve them, make the designs and where these things are located kind of more organized, clean them up, improve them, upgrade them, I think that this can only just benefit the ultimate feeling about what and how people use the park. Next slide. And so at this point, I think we're here to hear from you. And so I'm going to pass it off to Lauren, but I think maybe this would be a good point, Lauren, for if people had any comments or questions from what they've just seen, give us a little feedback. There's more to go, but let's just see if anybody had any quick comments from what they've just heard for the past half an hour.
Thanks, Ricardo. I also just wanted to acknowledge that Rep. Worrell also joined. So I'm not sure, Rep., if you had anything that you wanted to jump in and say as well, but I wanted to give you that opportunity if you wanted to. So if you do, just please raise your hand and we'll be able to unmute you. Also, oh, there we go. Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us.
Not a problem. Thank you guys for having me here to listen. I know my colleague, Rep. Moran, is on the phone, and this is part of his district, but this is a part of the district where we touch each other, and Clifford Park, my community members and constituent uses it, so I'm here to listen and move along the process if any way needed. And thank you for having these conversations, the first of many. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you for joining us. And so before we jump into specific topics, in terms of what we've already looked at, in terms of analysis or things that you saw in those, images, please let us know, raise your hand, and we can have everybody jump in. The other thing I just wanted to point out too is thinking back to the slide where we looked at the schedule. So we've got these 3 community meetings scheduled, and I didn't really get into what each of those 3 meetings is, and I apologize for that. So I'm going to do that really quickly because that'll lead straight into this discussion that we're going to have. So this meeting, traditionally our first meeting, although we've had a listening session, this is really the first design meeting. We talk about the analysis, we gather input, and we start to get a sense of what the community wants for their park. Our second community meeting, we talk about it being conceptual design. And so what we'll do is we'll take the information from your listening session, we'll take the information from tonight and next Saturday, and really try to get a sense of what the community is looking for. And at that second meeting, when we come back in December, we're going to come back with multiple concepts. So multiple ideas of what this park could look like. And then for the third meeting, we'll have all the input from that one, and we'll come back with what we sometimes call the final design or the preferred design, to say to you, did we get it right? Did we hear you? Is this what we, did we listen correctly? And so that's what our third meeting is. But in order for us to get to that second meeting, what we're really looking for is understanding a few things from you about how each space within this park functions and how you as a community would like it to function better. Because all of that helps spatially, right? Like, how big of a playground should it be? Is the field in the right place? So we'll talk about each of these and get your feedback on each of them. But just so that you guys understand why we're asking those questions, it's so that we can start to fit all of these pieces together in a way that is what the community would like to see. So I'm going to jump into the first one because I don't see any hands raised right now. The first one I want to talk about is the field. And then after each of these slides, I am going to ask everybody to put some comments in the chat or to raise your hand, because this is really the meat of why we're here tonight, is really to get a sense of what needs to be done differently. What do we want to see here? So some of the thoughts that we have, right? We've got current sports that are out there. We've got Pop Warner. We've got baseball, we've got softball. We know people use it for pickup games. People go out with, I see people out there just kicking a ball sometimes. But what we'd like to understand is, are there other needs for other sports here? Does the orientation of the field work for people? Are there concerns? The condition of the fields, shaded dugouts, like Ricardo mentioned earlier, which is a big thing in terms of shade, like Katie was mentioning, team benches, sports lighting, scoreboards. these are all things we'd like to get everybody's take on with the field surfacing. That's a big conversation that's happening right now with a lot of parks. So I'd love to get some feedback and open it up to you guys to talk about the field specifically, and then we can talk about other chunks of the park as well. Perfect. And I saw somebody in the chat said that Domingos and Marla Smith are crucial to this meeting. And I know I saw Marla in here as well. So I'd love, if she's got some comments, I would absolutely love for her to join in. And I'm hoping, I didn't see Domingos, but I'm hoping that he'll be able to join us for the in-person. Oh, no, he is on there. Perfect. So I don't know if either of them would like to be able to say anything to join in. That would be great. Perfect. Domingos, I think you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi guys.
Hi, Domingos. Yes, we can.
I just want to start off by saying the date and time on the flyer was incorrect. It says Thursday the 11th. I had some folks bring that up to me, caused some confusion today about what day the meeting actually was being held. Just to point that out on the flyer. Well, you know, we've been here before, and we're just asking again, you know, for the city to provide us with a safe, clean space so we can introduce new sports to the kids in the neighborhood. As of right now, the design that we were looking at from a few years ago was bringing in a multi-purpose field to be able to bring in soccer. We do have schools like Wentworth that comes out and do rugby at night. We want to continue to give them the space so they can use. So that's one of the biggest pieces there that we're looking for as a community, is to make sure that we continue to give other members equal time to use the space. So if we're looking to design it, it needs to be able to accommodate not only who uses it now, but programs that can come to the area in the near future.
Absolutely, completely agree. So I hear you saying soccer and rugby. I saw lacrosse in the chat. Are there any others that you know of, Domingos, that people are wanting to use or that you feel like we should be using here? Other sports?
Well, we always, you know, I don't know, back when the park was, back in the 70s, the fire department, 70s and the 80s, the fire department would flood the field and create ice skating rings. That's something that, you know, we've always talked about is having the access to a street hockey ring so the kids in the neighborhood can explore different programs. It's not only used for street hockey, kids also use it to play, you know, it's like touch and go soccer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
so that's,
I'm gonna, oh, sorry. I was gonna say,
Oh,
I'm
go
gonna
ahead.
jump over to Joe as well, because I know that their hand is raised. Just before I jump off, did you have any thoughts on field surfacing before we jump over to Joe?
Well, there was, you know, concerns with the turf having cancer agents in it and causing other medical issues. I mean, grass would be ideal, but if the city's looking to make it low maintenance and they do have a turf surface that won't cause any medical concerns moving forward, that's something we can always entertain.
No, thank you. And I appreciate that you brought that up. In terms of the concerns previously with the cancer causing components of that, the materials that had previously caused that issue are specifically not ones that we use in the Boston Parks Department. They've definitely created a lot of different materials since then, but I appreciate the fact that you brought that up because I know it is a concern for a lot of people for sure. Joe, I'm going to ask if you can unmute as well to talk about fields. And then, like I said, we're going to go through a couple of other topics too.
Sure. Thank you guys for hosting us tonight. I think I just really wanted to touch on some of the discussion topics you did here. I think we had also mentioned about leveling the field a while ago because there are pockets that when it is raining, get flooded and washed out and washed over. Definitely, like all of the sports facilities are there, but upgrades are needed. In the tennis court, clearly you could see even the paint and the benches aren't really there. If you're having the team sports, the team aspects aren't there. So I like that you mentioned like the team benches, the scoreboard, shared things that like people would want to use in a space. Because at this point we have the 3 baseball diamonds, and the one closest to the one on Norfolk Ave side, furthest from Mason School, has had very little use. But if you see it the grass has grown over where you'd actually be going around. Like it's just not a real high functioning space right now. So I think
No, yeah.
to keep it, of course, like the upkeep that we need, and thinking about what teams, both local and local schools, might be able to use, would be nice to see in the park as well.
Perfect. And I appreciate that you brought up the flooding, because especially with the map that Katie was showing earlier in terms of thinking about climate resiliency, that's going to be even more important that we're keeping an eye on that. So thank you. I appreciate that. Marla, you should hopefully be able to unmute as well.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Hi, Marla.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no, you're good.
My name's Marla Smith. I live on Shirley Street, so it's safe to say Clifford Park is literally right outside my front door. My comments sort of piggyback on Domingos's, that we want the fields to be safe and to be clean. And as Joe just said, leveling would go a long, long way, because there are several places that are rather dangerous. There's a sewer area like in the middle of the field where it just suddenly goes downhill, and that's, more than a little bit dangerous. The lighting is a really key issue, because right now fewer than half the lights over there work, which makes having night games or, late after now as the weather changes, or even early evening games next to impossible. But I also would like to throw in that hopefully you're engaging with people from the incoming Roxbury Prep School that's moving onto Proctor Street soon, because I don't know what their maybe designs on the field would be for school uses or for school sports, or if they would be wanting to use it recreationally. But I think they would maybe be very interested in having some input as well, especially as regards other sports that aren't over there already.
Absolutely.
Weekend parties.
And there's a lot that goes on over here on the weekend that is sanctioned and unsanctioned, and that probably needs to be addressed as well. So,
so concern about weekend parties, is that what I heard?
There's definitely some weekend parties that go on down here.
Okay.
And they,
they'll probably trash whatever you do.
What you plan to put in might be ruined by some of that, and that would be a terrible thing to see, because we've been waiting since 2019. The plans that Domingos DeRosa and I have date back to 2019, and I know that plan is no longer in effect or even under consideration, but we were up for renovation at the same time as the Garvey Park in Dorchester, which is where I grew up. And their park is beautiful. So to the extent that you can basically just duplicate Garvey Park to a large extent, that would be fantastic, because that park is gorgeous and very, very well used.
I'm so glad to hear that, Marla. I worked on that project as well, and I agree that's a wonderful park. So I'm glad to know that it's always good to hear which parks you guys all like, because that way we can take a look at those too. So thank you for that.
I like it in terms of there's more than just sports. There's like roller hockey. I'm sure I'm using the wrong word because I'm old. Roller hockey, and the walking track, the circuit track is fantastic. And space for little kids and big kids. It's really just a beautiful park, and congratulations for your work on it. If you could give us a park that's that nice, that would be fabulous.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Marla. I appreciate it. We'll talk more about some of those other aspects in a little bit too. Sarah.
Hi, everyone. I have a question. I'm sorry I stepped away for a second at the wrong moment. I came back and I see the field on the screen, and I have to ask, it looks like a natural field now, if I recall. Is that right?
It is correct, currently, yes.
And are you planning to stay with natural?
That decision hasn't been made yet, but we are looking for input from the community on the surfacing.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Tamika, are you able to unmute?
Yes, I am. Can you
And
hear
did
me?
I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, you did.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, awesome.
Hi, my name is Tamika Scott. I live on Clarence Street. So I walk Langdon to the park all the time. And then, so my concern would be the access issue. Like, Langdon and Norfolk, there's like a lot of traffic that kind of zooms through. And even though there's a crosswalk there, it would be nice to have like a pedestrian crossing, like flashing sign. Because even like if you're standing there, you're not seeing, or cars just don't pay attention. So my concern is, okay, you build this beautiful park and children want to get to it. And, you know, it's hard because of, you know, the street crossing.
Thank you. I appreciate you bringing that up. That, and like I was saying earlier, we definitely are not going to be able to do this park by ourselves. And so it's good to think about that, and we can make sure we work with some other city departments so that we can try to collaborate on that at the same time. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Thank you.
Maria, are you able to unmute?
Yes. My name is Maria Pontes. I'm the community field coordinator from the Mason Pilot Elementary School. And I have been working at the Mason School for 23 years. And that's where my children had attended. And I've been in the community since 1975 and reside at 111 George Street. So this is the community that I appreciate so much. And I'm seeing a lot of changes being happening. And I want also changes to happen at the Clifford Park Playground. And as you all mentioned, the Mason School used the Clifford Playground for our recess, begin at 10:45 until 1 o'clock. And it has been a challenge, but with the support from the community, from the New Market, from the 1010 Mass and everyone has been supporting us very well. We are working as a community together, but I do want to see changes at the Clifford Playground, especially as the kids are growing. There are more needs for them to use, and especially the older kids, 4th and 5th, especially 5th grade, they're into this racetrack. And sometimes they go around the playground, and I allow them to create a team to race. But at the same time, I'm concerned with the collapse with other kids that are walking through. So that's if you could design the park that creates a racetrack for the older kids, that'll be great. Especially when on Proctor Street and Magazine Street, we have a high school coming up. Proximity Fair coming up, and I know it's going to be a high school students there, and of course, a racetrack is one of them. And if you could incorporate that into it, that'll be great. And also, I am always with my stop sign, helping student crossing street from one side to another, and I experienced challenge with the cars. They've been speeding like crazy. They are ignoring the sign that says a school zone. They are not even paying attention to that. And I work through DSNI once and try to work with the community liaison to see if we could have a street light crossing, just to the one that you press the button near St. Patrick Church, just a way to cross the street. Because I don't want the car to hit me, nor the kids. But there's no respect with the cars driving, passing by. And if you could add the street, especially when it's going to be a beautiful playground, it's going to be like excitement, there will be more people participating, and without the street crossing light, and it's going to be a disaster. That's just, I speak forward. Yeah.
No, and I know you know this park, so I hear you for sure.
So, and also I know the playground is public, and it's public. Anyone are welcome. But the Mason School, we don't have a gym. We don't have no playground in our backyard. We hardly have a parking space to accommodate the people from the pool and ours. And the only space that we have in the back is just to do a physical education. So we don't have no playground. So playground is, we look forward as the weather permits to go from 10:45 to 1 o'clock. o'clock. And I wish the city could make some kind of sign just to say, for the during school year hours and between the school days, between 10:30 to 1 o'clock, this place is being used by Mason School students. If the sign is there somewhere that the public will be able to see it, it will avoid me have a conflict with our neighbors, because I'm the recess supervisor. I'm there to help the students, but at the same time, I have to tell families, can you please give us 1 hour until we finish so you can come with your kids? Because we have, it's a inclusion school model, Mason School. And we have a student with several needs. And fourth graders come and play with kindergarten students, with the 5 years old or 6 years old coming from the public, from outside, to come and play there. And it's hard to keep them apart. For us, we have a schedule, kindergarten at this time, and second, third, and fourth, to avoid that collapse. But with outside people coming, when you try to tell them we are using, it's a public park. We have a right to be here too. And we cannot fight with them. They are right. There's no sign there that says Mason School is being used. I hope I'm not asking for too much.
Well, that's not a decision I can make, but I'm happy to have that conversation with those in the Parks Department who are higher up than me. I definitely hear what you're saying, and I'm happy to start that conversation on our end and get back to you on it, Maria. And Diane Wilkerson, are you able to unmute now?
I am unmuted. Good evening, everybody.
Perfect.
Diane Wilkerson, I am resident of Roxbury. Two points that I want to make. One is the issue that Domingo raised, and I think ought to be literally at the top of the list on everyone's agenda, and that is the plan for maintenance and safety of the park. Whatever we do, we can make it beautiful, but if we don't have a plan to address the issues that are going on and have been, that Domingo and all of the folks have been so diligent about raising, then, why bother? And so it definitely deserves a line item on the agenda and some specific conversation about that. And then the second is, we just passed over it. I think you said, any ideas about field surfacing, and then we kind of went, that's another one that we ought to have maybe there's a specific agenda item in the next one about this, because this is a huge point of conflict and contention. Nantucket and Oaks Bluff have both banned the use of artificial turf. We had a real go round with the city, with Parks, over the planned use in the Malcolm X Park rehab. And it's just, it's important. It's important for the health of our kids. It's important for the health of the seniors who would be walking. And so those two things, I just want to highlight: safety plan, maintenance plan, and then the issue of the field surface, that we want something that's not going to be harmful to our children. Natural, and obviously make the most sense. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. And that's exactly why we put it on here for the discussion, because we want to be able to hear from people what their thoughts are on that. So I appreciate it. I think with no other hands raised, I'm going to jump over to courts, because like I said, we want to talk about these chunks because we want to understand when we're looking at these designs, sort of how they might flow together. So right now, as you guys all know, we've got one basketball court, one tennis court, trying to understand, from you guys, are the tennis court, or are the courts in general in the right locations? Do both courts get adequate use? I know one of the things we heard was the tennis court is really close to the play area. Does that work? Does that not work for people? Should we be adding pickleball lines to the courts? I know to the tennis courts, I know sometimes there's a concern about noise. And I know that, depending on where in the park tennis court could get situated, it's not, there are parts of the park that aren't next to residential. So this is just sort of one of the things we wanted to talk through about courts is, what are your thoughts on how they work and what we might need to know when we're starting to look at some designs? Anybody have any specific thoughts on these? Hi, Joe. Are you able to unmute?
Yes, thank you. Initially,
Absolutely.
I would say because there's use of, if you're thinking of putting other fields in and like the baseball fields, I think that space in the center is kind of important to make sure that we have, unless you like rework the whole thing, but it would just work to leave it open that way. But I would add the tennis court, like the tennis court, the way it is there, I would flip it the other way and put a couple of courts. Like you'd be able to put like 2 or 3 courts there, or even get rid of one of the baseball diamonds, because one of the baseball diamonds doesn't get adequate use at this point. So there's some restructuring that could happen there. Basketball courts, I'd say it'd be nice to have 2 basketball courts. I do see some teams that also come in the summer, like youth teams that are coming in to play, and they bring in their own little scoreboards and things, but it would be nice to see 2 side by side there as well.
And when you say scoreboards, when they bring in their own, does that mean that some of the
Like
courts
the little ones that they like flip over on a table?
Oh,
Like,
that's cute.
yeah, that's the only thing that they had access to. But if to imagine if that's what they're doing now, if there was like a proper setup for it, I'm sure that they would make more use of it.
Okay, that's good to hear. Domingos, are you able to unmute? I'm not sure why that's not working right now. We're going to come back to you in a second, Domingos. Marla, I'm going to try to see if you can unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. My comment regards the tennis court, which does get some good use down there. But as Joe said, turning it might be helpful and adding a second one. And also maybe in one or the other, maybe in one adjacent to the playground, it would be nice for the kids at the Mason to have access to basketball nets. If not a full court, but perhaps like a 3-on-3 or something, so that basketball could be just another activity they could engage in while out at recess and enjoying recreational time. Because right now the basketball court is, as you've seen, at the far end of the park, which makes it kind of impossible to use for recess. And I also just want to clarify that the 2 fields that get good use are the softball fields. The one that is less used is a regulation baseball, which is bigger than the 2 softball fields. And there is at least one team that uses it. I see them several days on my way home from work. I don't know whether they're from a school or what, but it doesn't get as much use as the softball diamonds do, but the baseball diamond does get use. So having it in good condition would be nice, because right now when the park gets mowed, it usually takes 2 days. And so sometimes only half the baseball diamond is mowed, which can make playing on it a little difficult. But yeah, my throw in is I'd like to see some basketball use available to the Mason School and anyone else who wants to use it, but down that end of the park, so that you could have your kids playing in the park and maybe your older kids play basketball if that was what they wanted to do. So thanks for taking input. Appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Domingos, I keep pushing ask to unmute on you. Are you able to unmute on your end?
Yep.
Oh, there we
Can you hear
go.
me now?
Yes,
Okay.
perfect. I was worried we weren't going to be able to hear you. Okay, good.
No, thanks. Again, just to echo what Joanne and Maria said, the Mason School doesn't have a gym. Clifford Park is this gym. Marla just made the point again, bringing the basketball court closer to the school, flipping the tennis courts sideways so you can add a few more and within that area would be great. Also, the conversation that's been had was to put a multi-purpose field across the length of the park, in the middle of the park, in that space. What we asked for was to have it actually brought closer to the Mason School Again, so the Mesa School can use it, but then folks can still use the baseball diamonds, even if someone is using the multi-purpose field for, you know, soccer, lacrosse, baseball, football, or any other sport that needs that multi-purpose field. We also spoke about turning the tot lot into a dog park. We have a lot of dogs in the neighborhood. That park is being utilized by folks who are navigating Mass and Cass. So that park, technically, you know, even if you put a tot lot in there with the population that uses that area, most folks don't use that park because of the activities. So we as a community think it'd be better used as a dog park, since we do have a good amount of young pups in the area. Another piece is putting in emergency call boxes around the park to make sure when someone's there and there's an emergency, as you know, there's countless overdoses at Clifford Park. And if you don't have a cell phone, if you don't have anything that's anything mobile, you're pretty much stranded, left behind. So making sure we have call boxes on the perimeter of the park, especially at the entry points. Also adding water fountains in different areas of the park. Right now, there's only one water fountain, and it's located on the Clifford side, on the basketball court side of the park. You would literally have to walk across the whole park just to get a drink of water. We want to change that. We also talked about a spray pad within the playground structure. That's doable if we were able to flip the tennis court. That would make the playground gain some square footage, being able to add more to it, such as a section for the tops. There was a few other things. Folks don't want the needle kiosk there. That wasn't something that we wanted from the beginning. It was kind of like forced upon us, because it invites people to come to the park to do the wrong things. And we're not looking to have folks continue to use Clifford Park as a shooting gallery. We want to bring it back to the safety that we had at one point. Storage area for programs like the Boston Bengals and others who use the Roberto Clemente and a few others, area where we can store our equipment. I have a storage container there now, but we don't have any space to add storage. We're not able to bring in an additional container to bring in more equipment to grow the program. So an area where we can use to store equipment would be great.
That's great. Thank you. And I love hearing a lot of those things that you were talking about. And you'll see as we start going through these, a lot of those same questions about the dog park and do we need both of the play areas and the call boxes. Those are all things that we've got on here for talking about. So I'm glad that you're already bringing them up because they're on our mind too. So I appreciate that, Domingos. So jumping into the playground, that was a good segue. Thank you. We know, like we talked about, there are two different play areas. There's the one closer to Mass Ave and there's the one closer to the Mason School. And I'm pretty sure, Domingos, and tell me if I'm wrong, when you talk about potentially swapping out a tot lot for the dog area, I'm assuming you mean the one on Mass Ave, not the one closest to the Mason School, just in case anybody's listening. That's the one that we're thinking of. And so one of the things we wanted to talk about is, do we need those two playgrounds? If we got rid of the one by Mass Ave, does the one by the Mason School meet the needs of the community? Right? Not, obviously we want to talk to the Mason to see if it meets the needs of the Mason, but we also want to see, does it meet the needs of the community when the Mason's not using it? And, the proximity to the tennis court, like we talked about, and I think we already got some good feedback on, some of the tennis in the court things, gates and fences, do we need additional seating for caregivers? What age children use the play area most? I know we know the age groups of the kids at the Mason, and we know that we'll have another school coming in, but in terms of people that live in the neighborhood, what age groups are we looking at there? And another question that we often have is, should the younger and older play areas be separated a little bit? Do we want them together so that if you've got kids in different age groups, you can watch them at the same time? And we do have a whole other slide about water play too. So that's coming up too, Domingos. So any thoughts on the playground in general? And then we also, I'm going to just jump ahead one. We also want to get a sense from people about, what kind of play do we want here, right? Do we want kind of larger structures? Do we want, some smaller structures that have a lot of little individual components so kids can spread out a little bit? Is it better to have bigger structures so that kids can all join together? And the reason that we're asking this is because that spatially, like Domingos was talking about, determines how big of a space we want for the play area, which then helps us determine, how much space we need for a water play and where the tennis should possibly shift to. So we just want to go ahead and get some feedback on this. And to throw out there, and I'm definitely going to be hitting Maria up for this, is we really want to do, which we've done with some other schools, some design charrettes with the kids from the Mason when we start picking equipment and really start getting into the heart of what this playground looks and feels like. So please know that this is not in any way taking away from that. This is more about us kind of starting with those big concept ideas. And then once we start to get into that, we can really get the kids involved as well. Any thoughts on play stuff? Anybody disagree and feel like we do need 2 play areas? Domingos, hi. Are you still unmuted? Perfect. Okay. Awesome.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. What are your thoughts?
I've had a few interactions with families with children that have physical and learning disabilities. And that was one of the big issues. There's nothing in the swing structure to accommodate those families. So that's something that we would love to have incorporated within the park, is to make sure that we are able to provide those families the same opportunities. Also, within the play structure, bigger would be better. In my opinion, because of the Mason School, sometimes they can have 30 to 40 kids outside during recess. And, there's only I believe there's like 6 swings. So it's kind of hard for every kid to get a swing. It's kind of hard for them to be able to go, up and down the jungle gym. So if it's something that has, multiple age brackets within the play structure, that would be great, because then everyone can have an opportunity to use it.
Perfect. No, that's great. And I'm really glad to hear those numbers and glad to hear about the, planning for children of all abilities, because, Kathy Baker Eclipse can tell you that's sort of my thing. And it's one of the things at Garvey that I know that Marla was talking about, being able to have kids wheel out onto things and really get more engaged in, with different abilities. And so that's one of the things on this slide when we talk about swings, we definitely want to have accessible swings in terms of the bucket swings, but also things that help with kids on autism spectrum, things like the dish swing. You can do a cooperative slide or a cooperative swing, where you have lots of kids that work together, but it also works like a nest for kids on an autism spectrum where they kind of feel a little bit enclosed as well. And then there are also things like a friendship swing where kids can work together. And so, like you said, if there are 30 kids, swings take up so much square footage for safety zones. We're never going to be able to get 30 swings in a site. So how do we put things in where you can get multiple kids on them at a time, so that, even though you can't get everyone on at once, you might be able to have some swings where more than one kid could use them at a time, but things that then also will help kids with disabilities as well. So that's another thing to think about when we're talking about play is, shifting some of those things, enlarging that play area helps with getting more swings. It helps with increasing water play. And so that's why it's good to hear that those things are important to the community as well as us, because it helps us think spatially about these things. So I think that's really great. Marla, are you able to unmute?
Yep, and just again, echoing Domingos, there's plenty of dead space behind where the playground is right now that isn't part of a ball field or anything like that. So the border or the fence or whatever could definitely be backed up, easily 50 feet, more feet than that, I don't know, tons of feet. And, it might change where the entrances are in the fencing along Proctor Street, but there's plenty of room to make the playground, close to double the size it is now. without losing any, sports accessibility. And also the accessibility on the swings and other structures in the park is vital because the school serves a number of people and the community has a number of people who could benefit from that. And with that said, it would be very easy to incorporate play spaces for younger children into the playground overall. Because right now, if you have a little one who would be using the tot lot end of the park, it's really complicated if you have two kids because older kids are bored out of their mind because the swings aren't very big and the slide isn't really much of a slide unless you're two. And
Right.
so having, where you could play with your kids all in one space and have all your kids engaged in activities, that would be helpful for parents and also for teachers. So, again, encouraged to see that, the thoughtfulness that's being put into the parks and the playgrounds, that's appreciated.
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, inclusion is definitely one of the things I try to push for in all of our parks, not just for the kids, but also for caregivers, making sure there's companion seating seating for people watching sports, making things age friendly as well in terms of armrests for people to be able to push up when they're older and have some mobility issues. So all of those things are things that we look at, drinking fountains that are ADA accessible, all of those things really are something that we try to look at too. Joe, are you able to unmute?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what Marla was saying about the activities for kids. And I'd love to suggest that we work with our school systems to find a space. I know they've been doing it with the Green New Deal work that they've been doing with the school district in incorporating youth voice, an authentic youth voice, with actually having them on the call. I know we like to think they're all young and we can think and be hip, but they actually might want something different from what we're saying. And I think it's always great to hear from them as to like what kind of structures and games and things that they'd like. Because even my now 12-year-old, I live across the street from the park, but I have to drive her somewhere else to go to the park because she thinks this one's boring.
Well, we
So,
definitely want to hear from her then, because I hear you. I've got a 14-year-old and my 10-year-old still wants to go to the playground and the 14-year-old doesn't. So it's hard. But yeah, I'd love to have her voice if she wants to share some stuff. That would be wonderful.
And I'm sure like there's a bunch of kids that live in this neighborhood, and then my sister has the girls are 14, but they still like to go to the park. So like capturing that voice, especially considering that high school is coming in, but then also still listening to like the younger folks too and seeing what accommodations would be helpful for them.
Exactly. No, I appreciate that thought for sure. Domingos, are you able to unmute again?
Yeah, picnic tables. There's a lot of families who utilize the park during the spring and summer months, and they also utilize the free lunch program during the summer months.
Okay. Yep.
But there's no place to sit down and actually have a sandwich, and there's 3 benches, and 9 out of 10 times those benches are being occupied by someone who shouldn't be in the park. But that'd be great to have a little picnic area so families can feed themselves while there.
And Domingos, in terms of that free lunch program, I'm guessing there's a pickup spot at either the Mason or the Mason pool. Where is that spot to pick up?
It's the Mason pool.
The pool, okay.
Yeah, and that goes
yeah.
on all summer, and there's families out there that come and utilize it, but there's no real place down to eat.
Perfect. I love this. You're like 3 slides ahead of me each time. This is great. So one of the things that we were talking about too, and I'm going to jump back in a second, but site furnishings, we're going to get there because that's exactly one of the things we wanted to make sure we understood too. So I appreciate that for sure. Joe, you've got something? Are you able to unmute?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to add in there one other thing that I wanted to bring up for like furnishings. One thing that I saw, I was just looking at the project that you did at Garvey Park, which is, I know that park, but I see like BBQ things were incorporated into the park. And that's something as a community member, I would not like to see in the park. And I would love to hear from my other neighbors if they have the same feeling. We already have issues with people that come and they already bring their own barbecues and things. So I wouldn't want one to just be implanted there for them.
That's great. And if there are people that feel strongly about that, one way or the other, feel free to stick that in the chat too, if you've got feelings about that. And that way, like Joe was saying, to hear that voice from a lot of different people, I'd love to hear what others think too. Okay, so water play and exercise equipment. So water play, especially like we talked about earlier, what Katie said in terms of, the, climate resiliency and the fact that things are getting hotter. Water play is definitely something that we want to add in, including additional drinking fountains, like Domingos was saying. And one of the things that I tend to like to ask about water play, again, it helps us when we're starting to lay out things in the park, is do we want it separate from the play area? Do we want it, incorporated into the play area? And sometimes, I feel this way sometimes as a mom, sometimes I don't want my kids getting wet. And so I'll go to the playground that, the water play is not close by, and other times it's fine. And so I also want to hear from the Mason, and Maria might have some thoughts too, in terms of, is it a problem with, the students being over there if they get wet? So those are some things that, from a water play perspective would be great to hear from people. And then the other thing that we heard when we walked around during the listening session was exercise equipment, and how people seem to really like that. And, people have mentioned Garvey a few times, and we have a loop around the field, and there's exercise equipment sort of stationed that are spread out along the pathways there. And other options are to have sort of a consolidated area, but both of those take up different amounts of space. So I'd love to hear what people think about water play being separate from the play area and exercise equipment, and whether people like it all together or sort of a circuit would be a better fit, do you think, for this neighborhood? Any thoughts? Domingos, are you able to unmute?
Can you hear me?
Yep, can.
So on the water play, it would be, be best if it was separate from the actual playground. So that is because of a few different reasons. One, again, when the school uses it, you said it yourself, students can walk over and wind up getting wet. Two, it's easier for parents to be able to keep track of their kids if they're actually two separate areas fenced in, than having them kind of all over the place. One kid's in the water, one kid's in the park. It'd be a little easier for parents to be able to use the different areas for safety. Locks on the gate also helps to separate the two play structures. As far as the exercise equipment, we've been asking for that for a good while. There's pockets in the park in different sections that can be, these things can be stationed around the park, where the walking path kind of gives the person that opportunity, as they walk around. You have 3 or 4 in this corner, 2 or 3 in that corner, spread them out throughout the park, not just putting them in one area, but having them all over the park would be great. Especially by the basketball court on Shirley Street. There's a lot of dead space over there that can be leveled and then used to add those equipment.
Thank you. No, that's great to hear for sure. Marla?
My thoughts on the water park part, the unspoken part is we have a drinking fountain in the park right now that's shut off because people from the unhoused population at Mass and Cass were using it to bathe in, and we're using it to wash clothes in. So I would have a concern that if we had a spray park, that if the situation at Mass and Cass remains the same, or even if it improves but is still there, that's going to create a situation that we really don't want. Separate from that, I like the idea of a spray park, but I do think it should be separated from the play area, because kids are going to be kids. And if the teacher tells them not to be, not to be playing in the spray park, they're only out at recess, they're going to accidentally go in the spray park and accidentally get wet, and then they have to go back to school. So having that be separate, I think, would be essential from a school usage point of view, but also from a, a caregiver, a parent point of view too, because kids will just be kids.
No,
so those are my concerns on that. As for the exercise equipment, I think that would be a great addition to the park.
Perfect, thank you. And I appreciate the hearing the concerns about some of the water as well. That's good to know. Diane? Are you able to unmute?
Finally,
Oh, there we go.
it sticks when you, so on the water park.
Yeah.
One, I think the whole approach for the park, as long as we are clear and understand that we have to address the reality of safety and management and staffing, we can't plan the park based on the assumption that mass and CAS will be forever, because it can't be. That's number one. Number two, the spray deck. We have a spray deck at the Malcolm X, well, actually Melanie Cass facility. And it's, as you know, it's separate from the pool, and not just kids love it. That the whole thought there was for even our seniors could come and sit on those days when the heat was bad. So it's not just for kids. I do think it has to be enclosed in a gate.
Okay.
And I'm not suggesting we don't consider it. But I don't want us to talk ourselves out of having a spray deck because we think that people who are unhoused may use it, because that denies the whole neighborhood of the kind of park that they're entitled to. And we have to figure out how to make it work. So certainly enclosing the gate, which gets me to the final, my final thought is, well, I haven't really heard much conversation about staff. City puts water there and gym, there has to be staff there. You know, if you're going to put a gate, that means somebody's got to come and open it. Haven't heard much about that, but the city has to staff the park.
So in terms of the water play, it's not a locked gate. It would just be a gate that's closed. Kathy, I don't know if you want to jump in on staffing, if that's possible.
Yeah, I'm happy to comment a little bit about that. So we have staffing and maintenance is a challenge. We have and we do not have enough staff in our department to put a staff person at every park. We have 250 parks. We have about the same number of staff people. That includes people like Lauren and myself who are not in the parks every day. It includes people like our administrative assistants. So we do not have the staff available to be on site all day for every park, or frankly any park. There's we just don't have that level of staff. We are fortunate that this is adjacent to our offices. We can see this from our place of business, from our offices. So I think we do have feel a bit more ownership of Clifford than other parks. But if we were to put in a spray play, it would be, it's on a timer so that it would be available during the heat of the day, 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. And on seasonally, it would come on in mid to late May and then off after Labor Day, typical to the rest of the parks throughout our system. So those are some of the challenges that are existing in the state of the city across the city.
Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate you jumping in on that. Marla, are you able to unmute?
Yep. I just want to say the hard part. Everything that happens at Mass and Cass impacts Clifford Park and has impacted Clifford Park for the last 10 years. We had an issue with people sleeping on the benches, so the solution was to take up the slats from the benches. We have an issue with people using the water fountain to bathe in, so the answer is to shut off the water fountain. I mean, everything that happens there impacts here. So we're talking about all these nice things that we want to have for the park, dancing around the very serious subject that if nothing is done to remediate Mass and Cass, And I mean, it's slow going, let me tell you, because the bridge closed 9 years ago, Friday, I think it was the 8th. Everything that happens there impacts here and is going to. So, I mean, we can pie in the sky all we want to make up this fantastic wish list, but we also have to be realistic, because it's going to keep bleeding into the park just like it's always done. I mean, people camp in the park, people sleep in the park, people use in the park, people fornicate in the park, and we have all these things on video, and they don't care that the kids are playing football, and they don't care the kids are in the playground, and they're asked to knock it off because there's kids around, and they shout a string of expletives at anyone who dares ask them to stop doing whatever it is they're doing. So we can't have this discussion outside. There's a Venn diagram, and these circles are very much overlapping. So, you know, we need to keep that in mind. So if that's how things are going to be, and this is how things are going to stay, then I'd vote against having a splash pad. And I hate to say that, because the community should have what the community would like, but there's an additional community that factors very much into this community, and that's just a hard, cold fact. So sorry to be the one to say it, but it needed to be said.
Thank you, Marla. I think it's unfortunately it's a factor that is that we do have to take into effect. That the city is taking concrete steps to try to address the opioid crisis across the city and at Mass and Cass specifically. And I think we're in constant conversations with our city partners on this issue, and it's something that we do really take seriously. And I think we also have to be realistic that all of our intentions and the change that we want to see is not going to be, you know, I think we can address the Mass and Cass issue, but it is not going to be an instantaneous change. So so we have to also be cognizant of that. So are there things that we can make incremental changes? Are there things that we can do now that we could implement later? Thinking about that, and what's the right strategy to be able to make that transformation. Maybe that transformation at Clifford is in stages. Maybe there's some infrastructure that we put in now that we can implement later. Just kind of thinking through strategically so that we can really make this a premier facility for the community.
Thanks, Kathy, and thank you, Marla, too. The other thing I just wanted to jump in really quickly, I'm just checking out the time and wanting to be cognizant for those who maybe need to jump off at 7:30. I'm happy to stay on a little bit longer. We had 2 slides left. So I just wanted to just talk through what some of the things that Domingo's talked about in terms of some of those other site features. So things like benches, drinking fountains, trash cans, bike racks are all fairly standard in our parks as we go through. So we can be talking about where those locations are and where they make the most sense, and where we need, more drinking fountains next to which facilities as we go forward. But I did want to just check in on other elements that people might like to see at Clifford. If you want to throw it in the chat, that's fine too. Things like added shade, whether it be from umbrellas or, pavilions or just additional trees, tables and chairs like Domingo's talked about as well, both from a eating perspective, but also, game tables. Is that something that people are interested in? I know there are a lot of porta potties that come in for sports. We have some parks that we have portable toilet enclosures. Is that something people are interested in? And then a lot of the other items that we have sort of touched on, dog areas, a minimum desirable area is about 10,000 square feet, which again, as we're looking at laying out the park, that size matters when we're looking at things. Wanting it to be farther away from residential in terms of the noise, call boxes like Domingo's mentioned, and security cameras, sight lines, visibility, and lighting. So all of these are things that if people have thoughts, you can put it in the chat. If you want to share with us, that's fine. I do just want to throw up here, and it's on the flyers too. We do have our community meeting 1 in person a week from Saturday. We're going to meet at the Mass Ave Playground. If it rains, we'll meet here at 10:10. Again, we're going to cover the same types of things here, gathering that information for us to put together for that second set of meetings, which will be some design concepts. And those are those meeting 2s, both an in-person and a Zoom. And then also that meeting 3 that we talked about, which will be the culmination of, this is what the park could look like. Did we get it right? And that's in January. So these are those dates that I wanted to throw out there for people. But while this is up on the screen, and if you're on here and you've registered, or if I don't have your email address, feel free to put it in the chat or send it to me or email me. I'll send out notifications about all of these and keep you guys in the loop as we go through too. But I did just want to make sure that we let people know that if they did need to hop off at 7:30. But if anybody wanted to talk about any of those last points with site amenities or site furnishings, I'm definitely happy to stay on and listen as well. But thank you guys all for joining. I really appreciate it. So feel free to raise your hand if you wanted to throw anything in there.
Oh, she said something that I forgot. Fuck.
Do you want me to go back? Was it on one of these slides, Domingos?
Oh, sorry. Am I unmuted?
Yes. Sorry, I thought you were talking to me. Anyone else have anything they wanted to throw out there about any of these last items? Joe?
I would love if we do add any like fencing or gates, I would love it to not feel like it's another cage. One thing that's beautiful about the way Clifford Park is set up is that it's very open. It is not, if you look at some of the maps that you put up earlier, there's a lot of residential area, there's a lot of commercial space, but there's not a lot of green. And it's just like a nice, open, beautiful green space that we have in our community. And if it was fenced all around, I'd feel like it's another cage right in front of us, right? Like, so to be conscious of like areas could be closed off more, but how closed off do they need to be? Like it should be an open, welcoming space for the community.
Thank you. I appreciate that thought. That's really good to hear. Domingos, hi, are you able to unmute?
Sorry, guys. Sorry for the F-bomb. I'm here, Tyler, trying to wrap up a job. But you brought up some other key points about this engagement piece. My question is, how was this meeting communicated to the community again? Not everyone's on Facebook, not everyone's on the email list, not everyone is connected to someone. So I had folks who I invited to the meeting who lives in the community, and the first thing they read was Thursday. They didn't really look at the date. It was more like Thursday at 6. And looking at the flyer and speaking to folks earlier today, it was actually today at 6 versus Thursday. So if we can continue to make sure that this information is being shared with folks throughout the community, that would be something that I would like to keep pushing, because again, this community has been waiting for this park to be renovated for decades. We're still playing on the same rim that I played as a kid when I was 12, 11 years old. We're still using a lot of the equipment that's been there for decades. So we just want to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. So we don't have this pushback, when we get to this final design and folks are like, I didn't know about it. It happened so fast. Why wasn't I notified? Because I've heard it before from other community members on different parts of the city. So if there's a way that we can, before the next meeting, like I said, I'm more than willing to come out and help leave the community. But we need to see it be done, because again, there was folks who live adjacent to the playground and never got an invite.
That's really good to know. And I can tell you what I know. I'm not the person that directly goes out in flyers, but I can tell you what I know of what we did for this meeting. So I did personally laminate and hang up flyers, probably I think I did 18 throughout the park in different locations. So I did that because I know that not everybody, is on like you said, is on Facebook or email. So I wanted to make sure people who visit the park saw those when they came in. I know that our marketing department and our outreach department did paper flyers. I don't have a copy of the map of where they did actually flyer, but I could get that and take a look at that. I have my email list, and I know that we also have put it on Facebook. But if there are places that you know of that we should be hanging physical flyers, that would be really great to know, to be able to continue that outreach, because you're right, it's really difficult and really challenging to get everybody. But if there are ways that we can continue to make that better, I'd love to hear about them too.
And I just want to add, Domingos, please keep sharing with your networks. We really do rely on our community partners, who have deep tentacles into the community. There are certain key people that we know are great at sharing information, are really seen as a conduit. So please keep sharing that information. If you are that person, or if you know who that person is, please let us know so that we can make sure that we do connect with them, so that we can try to broaden our outreach through these key community partners.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Lauren.
Perfect.
I just wanted to echo a bit of what Domingos just mentioned. One, I guess I haven't actually taken a look, because I was more focused on District 7 budget allocation, or capital budget allocation. And now that after redistricting, of course, having adopted different areas, do we know what the budget is for the allocation, the actual allocation is for this park?
So Kathy, you can jump in if I'm saying something that is not accurate. So right now we have design money allocated for this park, because we know that this park has a lot of needs, and we wanted to be able to talk to the community and to really get a good sense of those needs, to understand what the design needs to be for this park. And then we're going to go back in order to allocate the proper funds for the design that is needed. But right now that hasn't been allocated because we really wanted to do this community process first.
What's the, thanks, Lauren. What's the amount?
For the design budget?
Correct.
I don't have that offhand. Do you know, Kathy?
I don't have the number in front of me, but I think we had 600,000 for FY23, and I think I had a 7.2 total at this point for hard and soft costs for the entire thing. But we are going to revisit that in the coming months.
Thanks, Kathy. And I guess that matters, right? Like even with design and looking at studies and what we need there, and maybe issues that are unforeseen. And I really appreciate the execution of this meeting. I really appreciate when we're able to be super considerate of the community, and this has been such a respectful, and the tone has been amazing, and I really appreciate that. So I want to say thank you for that. But my point of echoing Domingo's points is that typically when we have parks that are in more Black and brown areas, we tend to invest less. So I guess the advocacy here is let's shoot for the stars. Even we do know that we have issues with mass and CAS, and hopefully we're going to find a way to find a resolution to that soon. But you know, the community deserves the best. And in terms of like the furnishing or the design, the splash pads or whatever it is, we want the best. There's a park smaller than this in Back Bay that received a $15 million allocation. And I know I'm not, obviously this is budget decisions or capital decisions comes from the mayor. But if we're all advocating, I think it helps to look at the quality of what we're bringing to Clifford Park. And so I'm really interested in supporting the community and doing that. And then obviously to Maria's point earlier about traffic and speed bumps and all these other types of signals, Maria, I'm happy to follow up with you with the streets department and figure out what are the future plans. We have here an inventory of everything development and streets improvement for District 7. We're developing a database that's going to go into a website where you can access it all in one place, all in one app. But that's in the works. But for now, I'm happy to meet with you and go over those updates with you. And again, thank you both, Kathy and Lauren. Amazing meeting. Absolutely love the community engagement piece of it, and looking forward to, again, advocating and hopefully pushing for everything that we want. Let's make it super beautiful so that, you know, we are a product of our environment, right? So let's treat people as we say that they deserve. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for those really kind words too. And please let me know when you want to have those conversations with the streets groups. I would love to be a part of that, because as we look at those entrances and as that park design comes together, I'd love to collaborate on that, so that as we continue to move forward, that connection is happening with the park design as it unfolds too. So I would love to be a part of that too. And Domingos, is your hand up from earlier, or did you have another thought too?
I think my hands were just still up.
Okay, just wanted to check. Well, again, thank you all very much for joining us tonight. I know it was a lot to talk about, but we really appreciate your time, and we really appreciate you guys sharing all of these thoughts with us. And I personally am really excited about getting into some design concepts and coming back to you guys to see what you think. So thank you again, and I hope everybody has a really wonderful rest of the evening.